Okay, welcome into the John Howard Society podcast. We are back after a brief hiatus in the summer. So we had our summer podcast series go on for people who were watching there. And now we are back to our monthly one with our first great guest to get us started here. So we've got, as always, myself, Josh Constantinou, and we're here on Friday, September 12th, joined by board member here, Conor Mullin.
Yes, hello everyone. Glad to be back. Conor Mullin here, president of the John Howard Society. Happy to be joining you on a chilly Friday afternoon. Glad to be back with Josh doing the monthly podcast, and very happy about the exciting guest that we have today. Right? Isn't that right, Josh?
That's right. Speaking of which, Amanda, we'll turn it over to you. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Do you want to introduce yourself and kind of what your role is there?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Amanda, and I work for the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. I'm the Senior Director of Strategy and People here at the Alliance. And for those of you who don't know, the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness is a national movement. We're a nonprofit, but a national movement taking bold action to help communities change the way that they respond to homelessness. So moving from just managing the problem to actually ending it. And so we're really excited that Prince Edward Island is one of our communities that we support and work alongside to really lean into solving the problem rather than just managing it.
Excellent. Well, again, we're very happy to have your support and very glad to be working alongside you as well. And I know there's some exciting collaborations between CAEH and John Howard that we'll talk about later. So, but before we do that, Josh, I guess we'll do a little update on John Howard over the summer.
Yeah, so I'll let you take it away from the board level and let us know. I know you guys don't meet over the summer, but what's been going on as we get back to the fall routine here?
That's right. Yeah. So as you said, Josh, the board didn't meet over the summer, but that doesn't mean that a lot wasn't getting done. It was a very busy summer. We hosted here at the John Howard Society of PEI over the summer the Federal Minister for Veterans Affairs, along with Parliamentary Secretary Sean Casey, who's local MP for the Charlottetown area. And we had a meeting with them in the office to discuss the Veterans Homelessness Program. And we actually had one of our clients of that program present to talk about how the program has assisted him. And we also talked about some shortcomings or ways that the program can be altered to help people further. So hopefully we'll get some good traction on that, and we'll be able to continue to work with and expand that program to help out members of the homeless veterans community here on Prince Edward Island. We received an invitation to the celebrity reception for the celebrity golf tournament that happens at Mill River. It's a fundraiser for the Boys and Girls Club of Prince County. We do a lot of work with them, particularly providing support to the Lifehouse shelter up there. So I was able to go up to that, talk to some people, kind of acknowledge the good work that Boys and Girls Club does in Prince County. And it was nice that they invited us in recognition of the work that we do there with them. As I think we talked about on the podcast before, our prevention and diversion program has unfortunately had to be shut down due to a lack of funding coming in from the provincial government. There was some media attention over that in the summer, so we were giving interviews to a couple of media outlets about the prevention and diversion program, what it does, the number of people it's helped, the number of people we've had to turn away since the program shut down, and we're actively working on ways to try and get that back up and running so that we can get back to helping out the people that we were helping out before, because it was a good program that provided a lot of good in the community. We've gotten some funding over the summer related to dealing with youth who are either potentially at risk of or experiencing homelessness or involvement in the justice system. So we got some funding there, and we've got a couple of new caseworkers hired who are working in that program. one of them sitting right outside our door here. So that's very exciting. It's an area of need, one that we weren't filling before, and we're happy to be able to fill that. And I guess the other thing, kind of one of the big things that we talk about, that I've been talking about for a while, is the collaboration with Atlantic Human Services out of New Brunswick to establish a halfway house here on Prince Edward Island. And we're still actively involved in discussions and working to move that file forward. So certainly hoping we'll have some more concrete news about that as time goes on. Yeah, I think that's about it from the board level. Anything from programming, staffing level, Josh, do you think you want to talk about?
Yeah, so I think mostly the youth program, which you sort of highlighted, and the folks at CAEH, as Amanda can speak to, we're an integral part of that, and we are partnered with them to develop and carry out that program. So we're fortunate that we have a team of 3 fantastic people. So we have somebody in a community engagement housing specialist role to promote and create awareness amongst youth homelessness and the needs that they have in the community, as well as work with landlords directly.
Nice.
And so that individual will be the liaison with landlords, help with all the kind of logistical pieces from lease signing to maintenance requests to complaints to inspections to everything else that comes with being a renter that is typically very overwhelming for the individuals we support.
Absolutely.
So their role will be to work in conjunction with the landlord, the client, and the caseworkers to basically help that process go as smoothly. And honestly, I think I see a lot of their role being just listening when landlords need to vent and express some of their concerns.
Sure.
And I think the fact that can go to somebody and then they can kind of relay what's needed to the client, and it can go back through the chain of command, probably will avoid some conflict and confrontation.
Yeah, I think you're right. Having somebody in that role to smooth out those issues before any type of kind of formal eviction process or anything else is initiated, or to have a middleman to prevent the relationship between the tenant and the landlord from becoming overly contentious is definitely very helpful. So it's very glad to have someone in that role.
Yeah, we're really happy about that. And then go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in and just say, the Canadian Alliance is really excited to enter into this test with John Howard Society on the project. And just for folks who might not know, the project is in partnership with the Government of Canada, who's invested a significant amount of money to help communities test and iterate different approaches to reducing homelessness, helping different populations like youth move into housing and keep that housing for the long haul. And so we're really excited to do that. But the reason that I just want to highlight that John Howard and PEI in general is able to do that is because you're collecting now real-time data. And that data is identifying for you that once people get housed, they're having a hard time keeping that housing. And so your data is showing that this is really going to help you learn and evolve the way that you respond to people experiencing homelessness and the supports that they need once they get housed.
Absolutely. And speaking of data collection, Josh, I think one thing we should probably mention is that we're the community entity for the Canadian government's Reaching Home program, our Reaching Home Alliance. And as a part of that, there are certain data collection requirements, which we have been complying with, and our data collection has been reviewed. And as such, we have achieved a particular ranking, and you may remember the name of that ranking better than I do, which just speaks to the quality of the data that we're collecting, which is always nice to know. And we were, I believe, the first community in Canada to achieve that designation, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so that's actually through Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. So that's right up Amanda's alley there in terms of hitting the quality by name data, and quality veterans by name data. Yeah. So we happened to hit both of those simultaneously pretty early in the process, and we're celebrated for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've reached the most updated version of quality, because as we continue to learn from across communities across the country like yours, but also across the world, we're connected into partners all over the world that are trying to learn through their data about what it takes to end homelessness. And so we continuously evolve and update what it means to have quality data. And you've reached the sort of like the most recent level of quality in both veterans and chronic homelessness. And so we're very excited to continue to support you in not only collecting the data, but how you use that data. And so one of the things I think is really important for folks to realize is that when you're able to measure homelessness, when you're able to see who in your community is experiencing homelessness and what they need, it gives you these really important insights, right? Like, so you've got an ability to understand who's coming in and why. And we know nationally, and for most communities like yours, the number one reason why people become homeless is because they don't have enough money to be housed. Like, they can't pay their rent, or, you know, if they owned a house, their mortgage, and so they end up losing their housing. And the second reason is family breakdown. So we know, you know, really homelessness is a housing problem. And I'd love to dig in a little bit about, you know, what's going on in PEI, and why is, you know, your homeless numbers increasing, and what are some things that you can do about it?
Well, I think that sounds like a great segue, Amanda. So, you know, happy to turn it over to you now, and let's dive right in.
And one thing, just before we jump in, just as an overall theme to our fall podcast here, we are working off of the 5 pillars out of the federal framework to reduce recidivism. And so Amanda is here today on behalf of CAEH as an expert in the housing pillar.
Absolutely.
And so housing is obviously a critical part of criminal justice and success for people when we're trying to reduce recidivism. Yeah. And so we can dig into that a bit more, but just wanted to make sure that the people understand how this fits into the larger theme that we're going to be up to here over the next 5 to 6 months.
Absolutely.
Amanda, thanks for my opportunity to throw that in, and then, yeah, turn it over to you for questions around data and conversations about data.
Yeah, really excited to dig into what's happening in PEI and what's unique to PEI, but also, you know, what are some common themes and patterns across the country. And when we see that, those common patterns and themes across the country, we're able to really expedite what works, because we're learning from each other, and the communities. What we build is, it's called Built for Zero, and it's really a movement of bringing, you know, 68 communities together from coast to coast to coast to learn from each other, so that they can scale solutions faster and learn, you know, so they don't have to start from scratch, essentially. And so we're really excited to have PEI on board with us. And a little fun fact about me is that my great grandmother was actually born and raised in St. Peter's Bay.
Oh,
and my daughter, and my daughter currently lives in Stratford right now.
Excellent.
So I was actually just there a few weeks ago. And so I had a chance to enjoy the beautiful island that I love so much. My family has longstanding roots there, but also had a chance to pay attention to kind of what's happening in your community and the visibility of homelessness and how that's become more prevalent. I spent a lot of time in Charlottetown, and so I can speak from, you know, the Charlottetown perspective, and had some conversations with folks that were either in shelter or sleeping rough. And so gaining kind of that one-on-one insight too, which really does, you know, validate and reinforce that homelessness, first and foremost, is a housing problem. And I would argue that, you know, the 5 pillars that you're talking about, education and employment, health, positive support networks, and housing. But without housing, none of the other pillars will fall into place. And so we almost view it as like housing being the foundation of those pillars. And so really excited to talk about housing with you all today.
Excellent. And so, yeah, so let's kind of get into that a little bit, Amanda. So, you know, you talked about your experiences coming to PEI. I grew up in Charlottetown, and I can say from my own personal experience growing up, homelessness was never something that was really kind of first in mind. I'm sure that it existed, but I think it was a lot more hidden when I was growing up, you know, 30 some odd years ago. There were 1 or 2 kind of well-known street people that everybody knew, but outside of that, I don't think you could have pointed to or named another homeless individual. But you're right, as time's gone on, the issues become more prevalent and more visible. And I think that the COVID-19 pandemic really kind of cracked it open and showed people quite a bit more of the extent of the problem. So I kind of like to hear your thoughts, your perspective on that.
Yeah, definitely. So what I want to start with just naming is, Maritimers know how to take care of one another. And the common theme in all conversations that I had is, despite the challenges that people were facing, that there was a sense of compassion, people wanting to do better and to have, better housing and supports for people in their community. And so I just want to congratulate the community in terms of remaining compassionate, because it's really hard when you see this problem exasperating, people become frustrated and they want quick fixes, and we totally get why. But if I could just pause and ask just for a moment, if the audience listening in could just close their eyes and imagine their worst possible day, whether that was a death of a loved one, a tragic accident, a divorce, whatever that worst possible day is. And now imagine reliving that day over and over and over and over again. And that's really what people experiencing homelessness are facing in their lives. And so to expect, people to present and behave and look like we expect in society, I think is a really unfair expectation to have when they are literally struggling to survive. And so really, I think a compassionate response is the rightest response, not just because it actually leads to housing-focused solutions, which is, what our goal is, but it's also inherent in our values about who we are as Canadians. And I think I would argue is who you are as Maritimers as well, knowing that my family has longstanding roots there, and that's how I was raised too. And so I think that this is really timely because of the increase in prevalence in homelessness that your community is experiencing. And some of the reasons why, I think, if we were to look at your data again, because we love the data, your population growth over the last 5 years alone has grown faster than it has in the past 20 years. And so you've grown by more than 22,000 people in just 5 years. Now, why does that matter in terms of homelessness? Well, because it affects the housing market. Your rental rates are really low. You have a very tight housing market. And I can speak firsthand when I was helping my daughter try to find a place to rent in Charlottetown and subsequent area. She ended up landing in Stratford. It took us months. And that's, with a family who has an income, a family who has means. And so I can appreciate when you think about people who have, no money or very, very little money, how hard that would be to try to navigate a housing market that's already really tight and constrained. And so you're not able to build the homes fast enough. And I can tell you, when I was there in Charlottetown, I saw so many cranes that were around and so many apartment buildings going up. And that's awesome that you're building, the infrastructure that your community needs, but it's just not able to keep pace with the growth of your population growth coming in. And being from Ontario myself, I know that we've got so many people in Ontario that, especially during the pandemic, they were looking to move. And where would they move? They wanted to move, where there was a better pace of life. And PEI is definitely one of those places in Canada for sure. So the backdrop to homelessness here is really, your housing market. But with that being said, we know that there are solutions. There are lots of things that we can continue to do to improve the way that we're responding to homelessness. And I'm very hopeful, given the direction that your community is going in terms of investing in those housing-focused solutions, building your infrastructure, growing, better discharge planning is another thing that, we've talked about or that we've seen as well. Stronger supports. And it's all by having that data that allows us those insights to be able to say what is going on with our community. It's so easy to blame the person, right? So easy to just say, why can't that person stop using drugs? Or why can't that person just, get a job? And understandably so, like that's an easy way to look at the problem. But the real problem is not really the individual, because we know most people who actually use substances in Canada are housed. Most people who are diagnosed with a mental health illness or are struggling with mental health are housed. And so there's something else going on, and that something is housing. And we know that time and time again, not just from Canada or PEI, but from all around the world. Like we've had the evidence time and time again. And so we can't help people with their substance or mental health unless they have the stable housing and a home to be able to get the support that they need to recover.
No, and that's a great point, Amanda. And I know sort of, and you'll probably know more of the details of this, but I know you always hear or have heard anecdotally about communities or places where housing has been provided to the homeless people or the homeless population, and that within a short time span of providing the housing, the other issues that people were facing all kind of start to fall into place. And ultimately what you get is, for a little short-term cost up front, you wind up getting a big long-term savings in terms of, people attending, for healthcare, emergency healthcare, corrections, treatment facilities, all those kinds of things.
Absolutely. We've seen this. We've seen the evidence again. We've done analysis in different countries, including Canada. And we know that when you house somebody, the cost of the emergency visits that they have, the cost of police interactions that they have, the cost of EMS services coming out, those all go down in community. And so housing really is the foundation. I say housing is, criminal justice. Housing is medicine. Housing is, the way that people can get well and become part of community again and become contributing members again. So without housing and the right supports, I think that's one of the things that, our sector has seen and experienced is sometimes people will want to put folks into housing and then not follow through on the supports that are really required to help stabilize in that housing. And you can imagine somebody that hasn't had housing in a year or more, when they first move in, they're going to need some things. They're going to need some things, tangible things. They're going to need some supports from other resources. They're going to need, a friend just to come in and negotiate, with landlord issues, for example, that you mentioned in that youth program. They're going to need somebody that connects them back into community in a way that feels supportive and is responsive. And when you do that, we've seen time and time again that people can stay housed for very long periods of time and be successful at it. I myself worked in Hamilton and led a Housing First program there. And I can tell you that people who we would have said could never be housed, people who've been in incarcerations for 20 plus years. I remember one gentleman I worked with, he just came out of incarceration and he was discharged into an emergency shelter. And we found him housing and we asked him, what do you need in order to stay housed? And he said, I need a sense of community. Like I have no friends. My family's, given up on me. And we said, well, what is it that you'd like to do? And he actually said, I'd like to learn how to knit. Now, this man was like 6'5", bald, 200 plus pounds, tattoos everywhere, including on his face. Never did we think this guy wants to learn how to knit, right? Like it just seemed kind of out there, but we said, sure. We found like this knitting group at a church and we talked to it was a women's group. So we were a little nervous about that, but we talked to this women's group and they took him in and they became good friends. And I'll tell you, he struggled with addiction. And when he was sick, who took care of him? Those women that he built relationship with. And so we know it's possible. We've seen it, really impossible situations turning into hope.
That is an amazing story. And I'm sure you've experienced other stories like it. And, it's those kind of successes that give us the strength to kind of keep going in what can sometimes be an uphill battle. But that's phenomenal to hear.
Yeah, I think you touched on the support piece, which I think is the key component. Is we know that there are some challenges or complexities or struggles that people have, and so there's this illusion of like, well, if we just give them housing, then they'll be all set because now they've got a safe place to go. And the reality is that there's a lot of skills, a lot of responsibilities, a lot of things that come with being a tenant and either renting a room or renting an apartment or whatever other kind of situation. And so having those supports in place for people is the key, particularly early in the process when they're trying to adapt to this new normal, many of which, like, their normal was survival mode, where there's like a different set of laws, if you will, or a different set of lifestyle, where certain survival mechanisms were how you would be successful in that world. But those same survival mechanisms don't translate when you're trying to deal with a landlord or a social assistance worker or a probation officer or whatever else is going on. Right?
Yeah, you raised an interesting point about, the supports piece. And I think that gets missed a lot. And here's the dynamic that happens that people oftentimes don't have insight into, is that when charitable organizations are being asked to do really complex work ending, really hard social problems, oftentimes they're relying on grants or donor dollars to do that really important work. And most of those workers are minimum wage paid workers across the country. And so coming in with lots of passion and lots of good intentions, but not necessarily the skill sets to deal with those complexities every day. And so one of the things that we at the Canadian Alliance do is we offer those trainings and interventions for frontline staff, for organizations, to be able to implement those skills to make sure that, when they're delivering that intervention, when they're providing those supports and services, they're doing it in a way where they feel they have the skills and competencies and capacities to yield a successful outcome, which is oftentimes that person getting stably housed. But it's tricky work. It's not an easy thing to do, and it does require investment in training your staff and having the capacity required to do that. And so we at the Canadian Alliance, we deliver those trainings to communities, but we also ensure that we're taking those lessons learned and advocating that back up to provincial and federal governments so that they know what it takes to actually solve the problem.
Fantastic. So, Amanda, I want to kind of go back a little bit to that story you told about that gentleman getting out of custody. Obviously, we're talking about housing as one of the pillars of the federal framework to reduce recidivism. And he kind of talked about how none of those other pillars can come into place until housing is there. And I know here on Prince Edward Island, we have a pretty significant problem. About 2/3 of our inmates who are released from the correctional center here are released into homelessness. And so I'd be really interested to hear kind of your experiences or the data that you have that show what homelessness does to recidivism rates, and consequently what housing people does to those recidivism rates.
Yeah, for sure. And so this is definitely an area of interest about discharge or exits into homelessness from provincial institutions. So it could be corrections, it could be hospital, it could be child welfare. And what we've seen is a lot of disconnect amongst the systems happens at this point, right? Where somebody is leaving that provincial service, and then the plan is they end up in shelter or on the streets. And so we know that through the data. What we don't have good data on yet, I'll say, is being able to figure out at a national level or at a provincial level what the recidivism rate back is into those institutions, because those data systems through health and corrections and housing and homelessness don't speak to each other yet. And so we can only speak about it from the position of the housing and homelessness sector. But what we can say for certainty is that, yes, lots of people do get discharged from corrections into homelessness. Oftentimes they become part of the shelter system, or they end up on the streets. We do know from those individuals who have had previous interactions with the justice system, once they do get housed and are stable in their housing, they oftentimes don't end up back in jail, or interactions with the police go down. And so we do have evidence of that in different communities that are focusing on interventions where they're collecting that data. But again, you can't measure what you're not tracking. And so you need to be able to have the right information, the right systems in place to be able to collect that information, which is so critically important to then take that back to the provinces and say, this is what we're seeing across your different public institutions and services, and we know that no one wants, those institutions to fail people. And so, how do we do a better job? But we definitely need to do more data collection on that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And I know that's something that we've been talking about here as sort of the community entity, and then sort of through our partnership with CEH and looking at potential opportunities to, increase that discharge planning services or support that. We do have a position that is embedded within the Provincial Correctional Center. Mm-hmm. And so that position is helping while people are incarcerated. But what we're finding is that the number of people that need support after leaving exceeds the capacity of that person, mm-hmm. even if they're trying to kind of redirect some of those folks to existing services, right? And so there's a number of challenges that come with that, right?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just, there's a number of challenges, one of which is the continuity of services, right? So we find that if they connect with somebody while incarcerated, and then are released and told, John Smith is now going to be your worker. Let me go kind of introduce you. That disconnect or discontinuity in services creates challenges. And so having an opportunity where the community-based physician can still go in and meet with them prior to release and work in conjunction with the institutional position, if you will, I think would be a way to create more of a seamless transition for people.
Definitely. Well, you know what I'm hearing, Josh? I'm hearing another potential innovation project for John Howard.
Ryan said it wasn't already in our minds.
Let's keep chatting about we're going to have 5 rounds of funding. So let's keep chatting about what round 3 might look like for you. And that would be a really interesting project to be able to see like what more longitudinal supports through the process of getting housed and then stabilizing that housing. And you yourselves could collect that data in your community, and we can definitely help you to develop those tools to do that.
That sounds like a plan to me.
Count us in. We'll do the legwork to get that started.
So something else that I had wanted to talk about, and your comment, Amanda, about being on PEI and seeing all the construction that was going on. And, something I think that we find here at John Howard Society is that, you can build all of the housing units you want, but if you don't make those housing units affordable for people, it doesn't matter. And we have the population explosion and the housing, the subsequent spike in housing prices and spike in market rent. It's hard even for people who are employed and have, means to be able to afford housing. And it's prohibitive for people who have any other kind of challenges. So have you seen any really successful ways of speaking to either developers or landlords on these types of projects to get people to provide housing units at lower costs, more affordable, or to designate units for, people who might be like some of the John Howard clients who might be considered hard to house? Are there any kind of effective strategies you've experienced in that field?
Absolutely. There's a couple of different ways that we can look at this problem. And so I'll just touch on a couple. The first is the infrastructure problem, which is what we talked about. The rental market and prices really are supply and demand driven. And so with PEI in 2024 hit a record number of 1,684 new units being built, which is incredible. Like that's amazing infrastructure growth for a community, of your size and scale. But if you're not keeping pace with the demand, so even despite those high starts for units, it's still not enough to lower the cost of housing. One of the interesting things we're seeing in Ontario right now is the housing market starting to soften. And so for the first time, and I don't even know how long, Toronto's housing market is actually going down. And so it's becoming more affordable. And why is it becoming more affordable? Because there's more units now that are available than ever before. Like there's this, and the reason is oftentimes because of some of the changes in market conditions relative to interest rates and how many people are moving out of the rental market and into the housing market. And so there's this inflow and outflow of supply and demand that really drives the cost of housing and the cost of rents. That being said, we can't wait for, there may never be enough affordable housing for everybody. And so what do we do in that situation, especially in this type of a market? And that's where we turn to more creative solutions that are more related to specific interventions. And so we've seen governments dedicate housing subsidies and housing resources. We've seen it in really creative ways being done. That gives landlords the security, especially if those rents are being paid direct to landlord. That gives the landlord some sense of security. We've seen people stack different government funds. And so if they're getting social assistance, giving a top up on their rental to be able to afford the current market for a period of time until that person can get stabilized enough and start working again or start generating their own income again. That's been really successful in a lot of communities. There are different ways, I've seen some agencies that will actually have contracts with landlords where they will sort of take ownership of the lease of, let's say 5 or 10 units, and then they will manage those leases and broker those leases directly with the landlord and determine who will be living in those units at any given time. And then again, offsetting the cost. We've seen negotiations where landlords will donate certain percentage of units to an agency in that model as well. And they can, there's a bit of a tax incentive there sometimes if the agency set up in a way that allows for that to take place if they're a nonprofit, for example, or a charity, I should say. So there's different models out there. There's tons and tons of different models. And again, the beauty of communities being connected into our organization is that we have these insights about all these things that are actually capable of working in different communities across the country and in other countries as well, that we can definitely bring in and then, tweak it to local context.
Excellent. Well, that's really very hopeful, and hopefully something that we can chat about between CAEH and John Howard as to what some effective strategies might be for our current housing market and climate.
Yeah,
definitely. We've got some ideas to pick up.
Yeah, and I think that's been one of the benefits that we've certainly noted about being connected to CAEH and part of the Built for Zero and having a monthly coaching call with our improvement advisor is that opportunity to say, like, hey, here's something we're struggling with. Are there other communities that have trialed something similar? And them to be able to go back to sort of your network of people and say, like, hey, does anybody have a community where this has popped up and they've come up with something, and then come back with some potential ideas?
Definitely.
That resource or network of resources has been very beneficial.
That's so great to hear. And, we are bringing 2,500 of our closest friends together across the sector in October for our national conference being held in Montreal this year. And so we're really excited that that's another avenue for people working in this sector to be able to connect in, engage, and learn from each other as well.
I think you're going to that, aren't you, Josh?
I'll be there for year 3. Yeah, this is my 3rd round of going. I've been to Halifax and Ottawa, so excited to go to Montreal this year. It's even a little closer.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, we're looking forward to having you there, and we hope you're able to gain some of those insights, and hopefully we get a chance to connect and we can see each other face to face.
That'd be great. And same goes if you're back on the island. You can always welcome to stop into the John Howard.
Pop in anytime.
Say hi and put a face to name to some of the stuff we have here.
Be careful what you ask for.
Listen, if there's one thing that Islanders love, it's the pop in. So just pop in at any time.
This is true. I have to tell you, when we were just there visiting my daughter, we ended up just taking a road trip up to St. Peter's Bay. The McKinnises adopted my great grandmother up in St. Peter's Bay, and we just popped in on the farm. And before we know it, we're doing a tour and at houses. And so I totally get it. But thank you for the invite. I definitely will take you up on it.
Yeah, we'd love that. We're more pushing near the end of our time here. So wanted to give you an opportunity if there's anything we didn't cover, anything you wanted to kind of wrap up or end as a bit of a summary. Basically just turn it over to you before we sort of wrap up and call it a day.
Yeah, so maybe what I'd like to do is, we talked a lot about some of the issues and challenges. We talked about a couple of the solutions, but if I had to say what it takes to end homelessness at a community level, there's some really important things. And so that we're not just focusing on managing the problem and not just focusing on it's the individual's fault. And so what I would say is a strong local leadership, which it sounds like you've got in spades over there right now, which kudos to you, because that's not something that's easy to do, is to steer the ship with the movement. And so strong local leadership, absolutely essential. Having real-time data and having the frontline staff being able to buy into the importance of that data collection, because they are our data collectors, and being able to give that feedback back to the staff to see what's working, where we need to improve together. So critical. We talked a lot about the affordable housing and supportive housing, but not just that, being able to connect it back in to the people experiencing homelessness. And we touched on that a little bit today as well. And best practice interventions, so critical, and the capacity and the support needed to get folks trained up in those best practice interventions. And then being able to know how to bring all of the organizations and interest holders together, whether that's the federal government, the province, local government, and all of the important community service providers together, working towards one shared aim and goal and coordinating like a well-operating system. So key and so important. And that's really what the movement with our organization does. And so I gave a very short spiel at the end because I knew, or at the beginning, I should say, because I knew by the end we would be talking about all of these things. And really, that's the Alliance. And we provide all of that to communities so that they can learn in their own communities and then spread that learning across the country. But what I want to leave with is, despite all of the challenges, there is hope. And I have the privilege, and I hope that you and your teams have the privilege of being able to see those success stories day in and day out. And we know that people, even though there's a lot of people facing homelessness, and the people coming in from becoming homeless is more right now than the people getting housed because of that market situation, we do still see people getting housed. Lots of people that people have abandoned and said wasn't possible. And so it's those success stories, ending homelessness really is possible. I have the privilege of seeing it day to day across this amazing country of incredible people doing really important work. And I hope that gives other people hope to know that we can solve the problem. And we will.
Love it.
Yeah, that is a great way to end off. So, Amanda, just before we finish with you, where can those who are listening find more information about the Canadian Association to End Homelessness?
Yeah, so if you want to check out our website, you can simply go to caeh.ca. There's lots of great information there about what it is that we do, how you want to get involved. For those that are listening in that are interested in supporting the cause, we've got direction there on how you can donate, how you can get involved. You also have access and insights into what communities are working with us right now. If you're a community listening in that's not PEI, you can definitely check us out as well. So please go to caeh.ca.
Perfect. And I'm sorry I said association. It's Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. My apologies.
Oh, all good. Yeah, that's why a lot of us just use the CAEH, but it's all good. Yeah, definitely. We also have socials too. If you want to check us out, we're on social media. We've got Instagram, we've got LinkedIn, we've got Twitter, we've got just about all social media platforms as well. And so you can simply just check out our handle. We're pretty easy to find. We've got a YouTube channel too, so feel free to check us out.
Well, perfect. Well, so everybody listening, please check out the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness at everywhere that Amanda just mentioned.
And that segues over to us. So you can find us at johnhowardsocietypei.com. And then we also have our YouTube channel here that this podcast will be available on, John Howard Society of PEI, and then our Facebook for social media as well.
Yeah, so please check out our social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, check us out online for anyone who's interested in any work that the John Howard Society of PEI does, interested in getting involved. Information on how to do so can be found on our website. We're always happy to hear from interested community members to provide information or to provide opportunities to get involved, whether through donations, volunteering. If anyone has anything they'd like to discuss or is interested in joining the board of directors, you can find information again as to how to do so on the website. We're always happy to hear from interested parties.
You got it. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you in person one of these days when you're on the island.
That's right. Just pop in.
Definitely will. And thank you. And thank you to your community for all of the important work that you're doing. We're so excited to be working alongside you. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Everybody enjoy their weekend, and we'll be back in October with another great guest and podcast.